say this. Sweeping is hard to do, apparently. Tigers look really good this week. Couldn't complete a sweep. It's their third time that they started off a series strong and couldn't finish off a sweep, but they stay in first place in the American League Central. And I guess sweeps it's kind of going to be one of the story of today's show is the Pistons are trying to avoid getting swept. They've only lost the first game, though they have lost 15 playoff games in a row dating back to 2008. Welcome into the show. I am Chris Castellani. As always, you can listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. If we're on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. That way you get access to all of our content. And did I bring up CastellaniContent.com? You should go to CastellaniContent.com. Everything that we post is there. If you want to get caught up on every single Tiger video, it's all there. Look, I guess I should probably start with the Pistons, considering the fact that they're in the playoffs and the Tigers are in game, what was it yesterday's, 22? But I'm going to start with the Tigers because it's my show, and quite frankly, I just think I have more to say about the Tigers. Look, kind of a mixed bag this week. They lose the series in Milwaukee on the road trip. They end that road trip 3-3. They come back home, win the first three against Kansas City, and then lose the Scooble start, which is really frustrating. And look, this team's gotten so much better to a point where, look, and I just brought it up a few minutes ago. There was a time where the best case scenario was that we didn't get swept. And now we're upset about not sweeping teams. With that said, and I've brought this up and I've been very consistent with it, I don't want to turn this season into a, hey man, things are just so much better than they used to be campaign. They made the playoffs last year. I want to build upon that. And so if they lose a game that I feel like they should have won, I'm going to say it. And Sunday's game was a game that they should have won. I will discuss all that, but there's so many positives that are going on right now that I do have to I'm happy to mention all this stuff. This is my favorite team in the world. I want them to be successful. Number one, you might think I'm starting with Spencer Torkelson, but I'm not, okay? Every time you think I zig, I end up zagging. I'm unpredictable. Nothing if not unpredictable. And I brought this up last week, and it has carried over. When you have the injuries that this team has, and sadly there might even be another one here that I'll talk about in a second, you need guys to fill in at a certain point and be productive. You know, can you replace the production Matt Vierling gave you over 162? No. Can you replace the kind of production that Parker Meadows is capable of giving you? No. You can't do that over a full season, but you don't have to over a full season. You just need to do it over a span of a couple weeks or even months. And I give the role players on this team, the utility guys on this team, platoon guys, whatever you want to call them, a ton of credit for stepping up. And I namely want to focus in on Zach McKinstry, who it's, I think, ludicrous to call him the MVP of this team up to this point, but he has been an incredibly valuable piece. And the thing is, people, for the last few years, people will get mad at me and say, why don't they cut McKinstry? What is AJ's obsession with McKinstry? And I always tell you, those guys will stay in the league for a very long time until the bottom just completely falls out of that bat, because there is a value that they bring that cannot be found on a baseball reference page or on a scorebook. Okay. The versatility that a player like that provides is absolutely huge. And the bat has been really good so far this season. He has come in. He's filled in for Vierling. He's filled in for Meadows and Wenzel. You have guys like Dingler who've stepped up. I'll talk about Torque here in just a second. That provides me with so much hope for the rest of the season, because seeing who was injured coming into this campaign, I was very concerned. I mean, I was openly concerned about the fact that I had this fear, given how banged up they were, that this was going to be a team that wouldn't start off strong. They had a relatively tough schedule. You obviously open in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. They've not only weathered the storm, but we're almost a month into the season, and this team finds themselves in first place. They absolutely deserve credit for that. The other stuff is stuff that I expected. The pitching has been fantastic. Skubal didn't look great on Sunday, but he had a 7 scoreless inning outing against the Brewers where he was overwhelmingly dominant. Job looks a lot better. Jack's going to be fine. I mean, Reese had a very good outing. Pitching's there. Bullpen's there. I mean, really, the games they've lost, it has nothing to do with the pitching. I mean, unless your name is Kenta Maeda, right? Which I don't even know if I want to talk about that. I'm all over the place, but let me just focus. Pitching's been great. I think that we're about a month into the season, and it's very tough because I've seen teams that had players that had ridiculously hot Aprils and just fizzled out. And so when you watch this team, you kind of have to figure out, okay, which parts of them are going to be pieces that are going to sustain it over the full season, and what part of this is fluky. I'm not necessarily saying it's fluky, but McKinstry's not going to do this all year. Okay? He's just not going to. It's just not in his repertoire. He doesn't have the ability to be a 900, 800 OPS guy over an entire season, right? Certain guys will fade. At the same time, I do think that so much of what we've seen from this team in the first 22 games is indicative of what they're going to be. They're going to play really hard. They're going to pitch their ass off. They're going to be gritty. They're going to scratch and claw and win a lot of games. I do think 22 games into the season, I think that this will be the best team in the division this year. I've actually not completely changed, but I am more confident now than I was coming into the campaign because I really appreciate and respect what they've done in the absence of their injured players. At the same time, this is where the negatives come in. I talked to Cody Stavenhagen in, December of last year, January of this year. It was all those days in the winter run together, but I interviewed him on Chris and Company. And I brought up the fact that despite this being a young team, that I think defensively, there is a real lack of athleticism here. And this was before the injuries to Parker and to Vierling. And this team has now lost 3 games that they absolutely would have won because they failed to execute basic defensive plays. Now, there are some instances in which I can kind of forgive that, right? Like Ryan Kreidler is the worst baseball offensive player I've ever seen for a large sample size. At the same time, when you have 3 guys that are injured that can all play center field, these are the kind of things that happen. All right, but when you look at the infield, outside of Sweeney, who I think is fundamental and good, not necessarily great, I'm not feeling good about anybody at any position right now in that infield. Torque looks a lot better at first. First base is not a premium defensive position. Now, they talk about championships being won up the middle. Right now, you got Keith boofing every other ball at second base. You had Javi, who made a horrific error on Sunday that ended up ultimately costing them the game. This is going to be a storyline all year. And whatever defensive improvements that we might see over the next several years, those reinforcements aren't coming. Okay? Maybe Max Clark is an elite defensive outfielder. He might be, but he's not. We're not going to see him this year. Okay? Now, Parker will be the one that will come back and will be an immediate boost because not only is Parker tremendous in center, but you then move Riley to left where he's a much better left fielder than he is a center fielder. But this is going to be one of the big frustrations of this ball club, and we've seen it bite them 3 times in the first month of the season. It's going to continue to over the rest of the campaign, and you can hope that they can make up for it, 1, with pitching, and 2, with some really clutch, good hitting, which they've gotten for the most part this year. As of the time of this recording, Kerry Carpenter is going to be evaluated following some hamstring soreness. I'm not going to make any predictions. Maybe by the time this is uploaded, people will have an understanding of what the injury actually is, but it would be a huge loss. He's probably your best offensive player. And, I think that this pitching staff at this point, even with the injuries they've had, because you now have Brebbia and Brisky on the IL, I just have so much faith in what Fett does here that they can find guys, especially at the bullpen, that can come up and pitch solid innings. The same can't be said offensively. And they've done a great job of weathering the storm to begin the season, but a few more injuries and all of a sudden you're kind of looking at an offense I worry resembles the offense of last season, which might have a piece or 2 here or there, but as a whole is not one that's really going to scare anybody. As much as I love this pitching staff, you can't rely on this team to win every game 2-1. And up to this point this year, they haven't. They've had some legitimate offensive explosions and good at-bats, and I do think even with the injuries, there's nothing about the approaches that I really am frustrated with or can complain about. I think they've been very consistent. They've seen a lot of pitches. The game on Friday against Kansas City, to me, was the prime example where they made Cole Reagan's work all freaking night. That was such a great, inspired offensive outing. And a big reason is obviously the fact that you've had this transcendent first month of the season from Spencer Torkelson. And, look, I think anytime we have a guy who has a hot first month of the season, Tiger fans, we immediately revert back to the Chris Sheltons and the Akil Badus of the world. I got to believe that this one is a bit more sustainable, one, because of the pedigree. And that's what we've always said about Torque is like we know the skill set is in there. Okay. You don't go 1-1 on accident. You don't go 1-1 by, changing the urinal cakes in a bathroom. Like you do fresh cakes, the Donnie difference. You do it by being really talented. So we know the talent is there. It's just a matter of him finding it. But yeah, Saturday's game, when their only runs came on the 3-run home run from Torque, and then you had Mize shoving over 7 innings. It was that was a very fun game, and it's just so frustrating that they weren't able to complete the sweep on Sunday. But I have to throw this out there: Torque's ascension has totally changed this campaign up to this point and could continue to over the remainder of the 162. And even if there is some fading, and I brought it up last week, we have to put a star by what guys like him and Dingler and McKinstry have done in the first month of this season with the players being out. They have totally stepped up. Now, a few guys that haven't. I don't want to make this all a negative podcast, though I am such a creature of the moment. Tigers just lost, and it was a game they should have won. There's two guys I want to focus in on that has the ire of the fan base right now. I'm not going to talk about Kenta Maeda just because I really do believe, similar to Ryan Kreidler, the second that this team is remotely healthy, these guys are gone. Maeda, Hinch was as flustered after the Friday game as you can be with Maeda just not being able to throw strikes. One is Riley Green. Riley Green obviously went through a 1-for-34 stretch, biggest slump of his major league career. Had a few good games against Kansas City over the weekend. Really rough game on Sunday. Double play with the bases loaded. Did draw an intentional walk there in the 10th. Riley, people are saying, is Riley Green the new Torque? And I'd say no. I mean, they're completely different players in my mindset. I don't think it's fair to compare the two necessarily, even though they came up through the system together and they're friends. Here's the thing with Riley Green. He's 24 years old, right? And he is now in his fourth year at the big league level. Riley Green had a wonderful season a year ago. He's a 5-WAR player. He made the All-Star team, led the team in pretty much every important offensive category, right? I think this year is a huge year for him because this is right around the time when players start to show what their ceiling is. It's right around this time, that fourth season when we saw what the ceiling of a Bobby Witt Jr. was. I mean, he did it really in year 2, or what a Juan Soto was, or an Aaron Judge was, where these guys come in and really start to, show that they're going to sustain it and be great players over a long period of time. If Riley never gets better than he was a year ago and just kind of stays at that 4 or 5 WAR level for the next several years, hey man, that's a great career, right? That's a guy who's living up to the hype. But I think we all see when he's on the makings of potentially an MVP caliber player, which is why his streakiness is very frustrating to a lot of us. And it sounds weird to maybe compare pitchers and hitters, but I will here for a second, because on Sunday, Tarek Skubal did not have his best stuff, did he? Right? Royals just give him fits, right? He gave up 7 hits in 5 innings, 2 runs, but after that rough second inning, and there was traffic every inning, he settled down a bit, continued to throw strikes, and on a day where he had probably his C- stuff, he ends up putting together not a quality start, but 5 innings, 2 runs. You could do a heck of a lot worse, right? Now it's hunkering down and avoiding the big blow-up outings. It's like that with hitters, where when a guy like Riley Green is seeing the ball well, you're going to say to yourself, this guy might be a top 10 player in all of baseball. But in general, a player is only going to have a finite amount of those stretches throughout a season, hell, really throughout a career. The true great ones are able to limit the damage during those stretches when maybe they aren't seeing it as well. And I think that 1-for-34 stretch, well, it'll just be something that we look back on and say, yeah, Riley went through it. I do think it is somewhat indicative of what frustrates us about him as a player, which is there are these kind of peaks and valleys. Now, by the end of the season, I'm sure we'll look up. We'll see a guy with a 4.5 WAR and, potentially another all-star spot. But I think this is such a huge year for him where we kind of figure out, okay, what is the ceiling for this guy? Because I think the Tigers have a wonderful young roster. I think they have a wonderful farm system. But assuming Torque doesn't keep up his 1,000 OPS pace, I don't think they have that one guy. And I could be wrong about that. I'm talking position player. Like, they don't have a Bobby Witt Jr. They don't have a Corbin Carroll. They don't have a Kyle Tucker. I know Kyle Tucker obviously came up with Houston and now plays for the Cubs, but you get my point. Like in Aaron Judge, they have several really good players. I don't know if they have that one perennial MVP candidate on this roster. The one who is the likeliest to get to that level is Riley Green. And I'm not burying him over a bad first month, but I do think the fans are kind of aware that this is a big year for him. And so the magnifying glass is held up a little bit tighter. And hey, look, this is what comes with expectations. Like Skubal was fine yesterday, right? 5 innings, 2 runs, but you read Twitter and he pitched like shit because our expectations are so elevated for him. We have this belief that he's going to go out and shove every time. That's what happens when you reach a certain point in your career. And I think that's kind of where Riley is now. Ultimately, I think he'll be fine, but it is going to be about limiting the inconsistency at points. And if he does that and just starts lifting the ball again, he's going to be just fine. I want to bring up Javi here for a second, because one insult that I don't think is fair. Well, there's a lot of insults that people have towards me that I don't think are fair. But in 2025, one of the insults that people have with me and the Tigers is when they say, "Oh, you just don't like that guy." In the modern age, there's no guy that I dislike. There's no person on this team where I root for failure. When guys do things that I like, I say nice things. When guys do things that I don't like, I say not so nice things. Okay. Torque last year was maddening. This year, I've been kissing his feet because the guy's had clutch hit after clutch hit, and he's driving in runs, and he's hitting homers. It's fantastic. I will change my opinion on a player like that based on the results. Okay, there's nobody that I have it out for, with one exception. And I was thinking about this. I know he made the error on Sunday that cost him the game. But I was thinking about this over the weekend, where people were starting to tweet at me like, Javi's actually off to a pretty good start this year by his standards. Now, I would argue he's going to fall off, and I think by the end of the year, he'll still be one of the worst players in baseball. I stand by that. I think that if you're holding out hope, you're foolish. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But typically when a player struggles the way Javi has, and has the kind of production, quote unquote, that he's had up to this point, this campaign, I'd be more inclined to praise him. I don't have anything against Javier Baez on a personal level at all. In fact, most of the media people I've talked to said he's wonderful, right? Like, I wish the best for him. Guys had a wonderful career, not in Detroit, but he's had a wonderful career. It was so much fun to watch when he was with the Cubs. He is the one player on this team that I can't separate art from artist. You know how sometimes a player that we really like might struggle, and you'll read on social media, "Oh, you just can't get me to hate you." It's the inverse of that with Javi Baez. There's really nothing this guy could do, sans turning the clock back 6 years, that's going to get me to like him. I can tolerate him. I think before yesterday, this season, for the most part, I have tolerated him. And that probably cripples me in what I'm able to do with my content to a certain extent, because I don't know exactly what. I think what it is that Javi's 23 season, which was actually better than his 24 season, but his 23 season was the single most maddening campaign I've ever seen from a Tigers player. Now, there's guys who've probably had worse seasons, but that one, it's a combination of watching that every day, coupled with kind of some things I was going through in my life at the time, where it's not necessarily his fault. Well, I mean, he could have avoided chasing a few pitches, but you get my point. It's not necessarily his fault. I just associate Javi Baez being bad with like a not great time in my life. And so even when he succeeds, I'm like, okay, good. I was going to say you don't always get along with people you work with, but we don't work together. It's just one of those weird things where I try to be as objective as possible. For some reason, it is difficult with him. For some reason, it is difficult. And there's been guys who I thought were duds that I ended up praising because they did stuff that worked out, right? I mean, we remember, Michael Fulmer blew his arm out and then was struggling, and then he found it as a reliever. Like, I'm not past the point of criticizing anybody. I'm not past the point of praising anyone. He's the tough one. And when I saw that error at third on Sunday, it was just everything from the last few years. Like, just it came back up, like some horrifying repressed memories. So yeah, I wish the guy the best. I obviously want him to succeed because it's better for the team, but I just have to make note of that. That is a lot of Tigers talk. It's not really, besides that, there's Pistons. There's not much. I'm not going to spend every week talking about the portal and who teams added, who teams didn't add. We'll get closer to that the closer we get to the season. Pistons played game one of the NBA playoffs against the New York Knicks in Madison Square Garden. Looked great for 3 quarters. Tobias Harris had a wonderful first half. I thought defensively they played really solid. Then they gave up a 21-0 run, and that's why they lost. I mean, very simple analysis, but I'm willing to venture you're going to lose 99% of your games giving up a 21-0 run, especially in the fourth quarter of an NBA game. It didn't really change how I feel about the rest of the series. I do still think coming in, I didn't really make a prediction, but I would have probably said Knicks in 6. I think the Pistons probably find a way to win at least 1, maybe even 2 at LCA. But game 1 was a winnable game, and it speaks to something that I've actually argued about with people in the past, which is wild, because I once worked with somebody who was adamant that experience doesn't matter in the playoffs. That like an inexperienced team can be every bit as successful as a super experienced team. Well, that is true. A game like Saturday completely proved why experience matters, because this Knicks team has been around the block. They have been to the postseason. They've made somewhat deep runs. I mean, they've made it to the second round at least in the last, off and on the last several years. They've had played high leverage games and these big situations. This Pistons team just hasn't. You have certain players that have made it to the postseason, but the core of this group is not used to these kind of experiences. And I think what we saw is something that we didn't see a whole lot of in the regular season, which was a little bit of shell shock. I think they became aware of the moment. I don't like to go the moment became too big for them principle. I just think that you get to a place where you realize where you are, and whether it's consciously or subconsciously, it just kind of hits you that, you're in a position you did not expect to find yourselves in. It's a big missed opportunity in a game where statistically it was very even for a heavy majority of it. It was not the most efficient Cade Cunningham performance. And when you watch the Pistons this year, I mean, even if he's not scoring, so much of what the Pistons are able to do offensively, and really defensively for that matter, is predicated on Cade's efficiency. And that was not one of his better games. And they just got cold. I mean, there's really no way to say it. Give up 21 consecutive points. That'll do it. I wish I had more to say about it. It is one game, and I don't even know when game 2 is going to be. I find the NBA playoff format, I hate doing this. This is another thing I got to talk about in therapy, is just like, I can't even come on here and say good things about the NBA without having some sort of negative. But even when the Pistons were great, I've never liked the NBA playoff format. This is a big thing. The Pistons lost. They're down 1-0 in the series. Wish them all the best. I think they'll bounce back. I still think this thing goes 6, maybe even 7. I think the Pistons are going to put up a fight. Who knows? They could even potentially win this series. They've fought back from worse throughout the season. Let me just say, this is kind of last week I talked about it with golf, but this week's like grinds my gears segment is playoffs in general in sports and what they've become. And that's not to say that they aren't wildly entertaining, because they can be. But in professional sports especially, in my mind, what the playoffs should be, talking about playoffs? What the playoffs should be is an exclusive collection of teams that are capable of winning a championship. I think that March Madness, one thing that makes it so cool, and I know this year was very chalky, but you see teams that are double-digit seeded teams making a run. And I think that 68-team format is so fun because you get in and you feel like anything is possible, right? It's why I never really had that big of a deal with the 4-team playoff in college football, because I felt like these were the teams that put together the 4 best resumes. It made the regular season matter a lot more. And these 4 teams can win a championship, And I know we had our blowouts and everything in the college football playoff, but you get my point, generally speaking. You cannot convince me that there are 16 teams in the NBA that can win a championship. There's like 8. And I've brought it up before, and it'll never happen because of TV deals and money and revenue. But I really think basketball destroys its momentum, because basketball hits its fever pitch not just in college, but to me in the pros in March and April. And I feel like that's right around when the NBA should be capitalizing on it. There's no reason the NBA should be going until June. It's always been silly. If you even want to just make it as simple as going back to best of 5 for that first round, you can. But I've always found it ridiculous. Now, I would much rather have the Pistons in the playoffs than out of the playoffs. And for considering the year they had, like, it is an accomplishment to get there. I'm not going to act like people shouldn't watch because I have some, quarrels about the format. But it takes 2 months to finish. The NBA just sucks, man. Why do I do this every week? I don't know why I do this every single week, where I'm so critical of the NBA as a whole. I just, even the game 1 of that Pistons Knicks series, I thought maybe I'd feel something. And I'm watching the Pistons blow a double-digit lead, and I could have fallen asleep. And that has so much of that has to do with Chris Castellani and not the Pistons. Pistons have had a great year, and their fans deserve this, and those players deserve this. I don't want to rip on them, but that switch still isn't flipped. We'll follow it. That's going to be the running theme of this podcast for the next several weeks as the Pistons are in the playoffs. Is there a moment where they can really get me to care? We're going to find out. All right, anything else? Okay, yeah. Spring football. The Pistons, I feel like this episode is going to end up being a little bit too negative, but it's just you guys know how I am with this stuff. Pistons. Michigan played their spring football game on Saturday. I have seen the argument from people over the last few weeks or months as teams have started to cancel their spring games about how disappointing that is. And look, if it's something you've taken your family to, and if you enjoyed watching spring practice or the spring football game in the past, I'm never going to knock somebody for their interest. I'm never going to knock somebody for what you're into. You're into what you're into. That's fine. Spring football to me is just like one of the most useless things in sports. I would argue, one, it's just a great way for players to get hurt. And two, at least something like spring training, which I watch because I'm weird, takes place leading up to the season. Michigan football doesn't snap the ball for another 4 months. It's like if they had spring training in December and then just said, okay, we'll be back in March. We'll be back in late March, early April. I think it's impossible to evaluate anything from spring. As we get closer to the season, of course, I'm going to talk about Michigan football and preview Michigan football. But this is the issue I have with football offseason is the way that I felt about this upcoming Michigan football team on January 2nd of this year is the way that I feel about them now, which is I think we're going to see an upgrade at the quarterback position. I think the defense will be in really good shape. I have concerns about the offensive line, and I really have my concerns about their lack of playmakers when it comes to the wide receiver and tight end position. You rely on Colston Loveland a year ago. And of course, the quarterback situation was a big part of it. But we had Tony Garcia on, and this guy covers the team. Said that last year's Michigan wide receiver core was the worst wide receiver core in the Power Four. And if it wasn't the worst, it was one of the worst. And I think really that's an issue. Let's say Bryce Underwood is that good, right? I do think that's an issue that Michigan has not really addressed and in some ways gotten lucky with over the last several years because, well, not last year, but the previous years because they had JJ. I could be wrong about this. I don't believe Michigan has had a 1,000-yard receiver since Jeremy Gallon. Jeremy Gallon was the Hoke era. You had a few guys that came close. Roman came close. I think J.U. Chesson came close, but, I think that they got the most out of guys like Roman Wilson, but Roman Wilson wasn't some, he's not some Calvin Johnson here. I'm going to throw it up to you and you go get it. Wide receiver. He's a really good small slot receiver that caught a lot of touchdowns when he was at Michigan. I love Roman. That's not a knock on him, but I do think that this is going to have to be a program that's going to have to upgrade their skill position players in some capacity. Now, I do think that they have gotten some guys in the portal that will hopefully help. But yeah, even if there is an upgrade at quarterback, which you can't downgrade after what you had last year. That is something to look out for. Somebody's going to have to emerge in that wide receiver room because I think that's been kind of a quiet problem for the last several years that is now amplified because you don't have the experienced quarterback play that you had in the latter stretch of the Harbaugh era. So that was talking spring football. That wasn't a bad segment. Happy Easter. All right. That'll do it for today's show. Follow me on Twitter at CastleLine2014, CastleLineContent.com. Find all our stuff there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify if you want to listen to this in audio form. YouTube's. We're there. Like, subscribe. Chrissy Company this week. Chicago Cub and former Detroit Tiger Matthew Boyd will be joining the program. And I already tweeted it, but the week after, this won't be the last time I preview this. The next week, we will be interviewing Curtis Granderson as well. So shout out to Austin for helping get that one. We have some very creative stuff that we're trying to do with Chris and Company going forward. And I think some of it could potentially be a little bit divisive, but I also think it's for the best. I've talked about it many times. Love what we do with the Detroit stuff. And I could talk to Tiger players and coaches, managers, like forever. But I do and have always wanted Chris and Company to be a little bit more of an expansive outlet. And I think in the summer, we're going to continue to try to do that. At the same time, we want to continue to network. And I'm proud and super amped for the shows that we have coming up, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So a lot to be excited about. Appreciate you guys for all the continuous support as Austin and I continue to work hard with what we're producing. It's been a time, but we're doing the best we can. I appreciate all you guys. Love you. Happy Easter, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.